Hi, folks. So like I said, this used to be called the business meeting. It's now been given a more attractive title, but possibly not more attractive content. I'm going to say some thanks to some people and then tell you a bit about how the society works, what we do, some stuff we've invested in since the last conference, how you can get involved or how you can look out for opportunities to get involved, a little bit about the next couple of conferences, and then the main point is to leave some time for questions or comments from you guys. Okay, so starting with some thanks. For the final time, I want to thank our conference co-chairs, Jenny Culbertson, Andy Perfors, Hura Baliati, and Veronica Ramazzoni. And also their team members, in particular, David Surgeon, who's the PCS wrangler, and Marcello Veridiano, who's their social media guy. It's a huge amount of work coordinating everyone who puts the conference together. I've watched with awe as these guys have run that process. So thank you once again to our conference co-chairs. Also on the society side of things, like in the back office side of things, I want to acknowledge the important work of our executive officers. Anna Drummey was in the role from 2016 to 2022, recently stepped down to be replaced by Erica Wojcik, who's our new executive officer. On Tuesday, the Society's governing board voted to give Anna an honorary lifetime membership of the Society in recognition of all the work she's put in, keeping us running. We have a lot of help these days running the Society and the conference, in particular, people at Podium, conference management, in particular, Lauren Moline, Sandrine DeVries, and Marichal Darmond. Right. There's so many people involved in putting together a conference like this. You have to look at the program to see all the names in a font size you can really read. There's a bunch of organizing committees that handle various aspects of running the show. These are those people. There's a huge program committee. These are the meta reviewers, so 164 people who handled collating reviews and making recommendations for all the paper submissions. And then we wouldn't have a conference if we didn't have people submitting papers and turning up and presenting them either in person or online. We had 762 full paper submissions this year, needed nearly 1,000 reviewers to boil that down to 205 talks and just short of 500 posters and flash talks. So if you're here at the conference, either in person or online, you probably contributed to making the conference happen. So thank you. Okay, so how does the Cognitive Science Society work? All this information is on our webpage, but very briefly, we have a governing board of 15 people who are elected by the society members, and we basically try and steer the society. All these people are listed on the website, just to highlight that among the 15 members, at any one time, there is what's known as the executive committee, the chair, that's me until the end of today. There's an incoming chair, that's Adele Goldberg, and then there's the past chair from the previous year, that's Kevin Gluck. And so we kind of try and coordinate the activities of the other elected members of the governing board. We're helped in doing that by our executive officer and our treasurer, so that's Erica Wojcik and Brett Martinson. We also have a graduate student representative on the governing board, and that's Intan Wardhani at the moment. There are various other people on the governing board in ex officio roles, basically the editors of our journals and the chairs of important prize committees. And then we also employ a couple of people to do stuff. So Marcello Veridiano, who's the web content guy, and Monique Krause, that's a new role as outreach coordinator that I'll tell you a bit more about in a second. The governing board is not static, it rotates. So we're losing 5 people this year from the governing board, including 2 former chairs of the society, Kevin Gluck and Asfa Majid. Intan's also stepping down as the graduate student representative. That's her term finished. Joining us to try and replace those people are our new elected governing board members, Tom Griffiths, Janet Shaw, Ken McRae, and Urja Unal. And also we have a new graduate student representative, Tiwa Isapi, who's a PhD student at MIT. And then finally, the executive committee also rotates. So as of the end of today, I become the past chair, hurrah. Adele steps up and becomes the chair. Kevin Gluck steps down from being the past chair and actually is leaving the governing board. So goodbye, Kevin. That means we need a new future chair, and that's going to be Anna Papafragu. So she'll become the future chair, and she's going to be the chair of society in 23 to 24. Okay, so what is it we do? What are all these people trying to organize? The society has a mission, which is to promote cognitive science as a discipline and to foster scientific interchange among researchers. How do we do that? Well, one of the obvious things we do is hold this conference. That's a major venue for interchange among cognitive scientists. We also publish a couple of journals, as I'm sure you're aware. We celebrate excellence in our awards, our prizes, our Cognitive Science Society fellows, also lifetime members. That's a way of recognizing people who've done important work for the community, and also as a way of, by giving out prizes, you make the event and the discipline more visible. We also have regular digital communications with our members via the website, the blog. We've started up a newsletter. We're more active on Twitter these days. And then we're also investing in some outreach activities to kind of broaden the reach of cognitive science, supported by our new outreach coordinator and also a new grant scheme that I'll tell you about in a second. Okay, so how do we fund that? All this takes money. Here's a very brief summary of our main incomings and outgoings. So our main source of revenue is from the journals. We got about $360,000 from Wiley this year for those journals. So the conference is also a source of revenue. $305,000 we've taken in registrations for the conference this year, and we take money from people who pay to become members of the society. We have outgoings. We pay stipends for a bunch of people associated with the society and the journals who do work for us. Our main expense, particularly this year, is the conference. $550,000 is what it costs to run the conference this year. And then we have other bits and pieces that add up to $153,000. Okay, so you might have noticed a couple of things here. So first, the cost of the conference is substantially higher than the registration fees. We've basically suppressed the registration fees and taken a $250,000 loss. This is US dollars on the conference. Normally we would shoot to break even. This was a conscious decision this year that we would keep registration rates low. If we were trying to break even, they would have been nearly twice as high as what people actually paid to register. That also means that the society this year has lost money, about $150,000. Again, that's basically due to the larger than usual loss on the conference. So if you're wondering how can you afford to lose money, we also have a sizable investment fund. It's currently got $4.1 million in it. This has been built up gradually by careful husbanding of the society's finances over the last 20 years or so. It's grown quite rapidly in the last 4 or 5 years, basically doubled in size. If you're wondering why have we got $4 million in the bank, you need a fairly large financial backing if you're going to run events like this. Otherwise, there's a danger that somebody puts on a half million dollar conference, and then something disastrous happens, and you're left trying to figure out who's going to pay that money. So we need a kind of financial basis to be able to run this kind of event and do the experimental stuff we've done with the hybrid setup. There have been years, a long time in the past, where the society didn't have that kind of financial foundation and was actually in danger of going bankrupt, kind of at the flip of a coin for the conference, depending on how it turned out. That's no longer the case because of this. Having said that, the governing board is trying to cautiously use this money now to support our members and promote cognitive science. One way of looking at this investment fund money is that it's for a rainy day. And as you have noticed outside, metaphorically, it is raining, right? It's a hard time to be a scientific society and running conferences and so on. So that's why we're able to tolerate a loss like we have done this year on the conference. Okay, so I'll explain why the conference was so expensive in a second. So how are we using our money? Or what have we been doing since we last saw you at the conference, and where have we spent some of this money? Well, we appointed a new executive officer and treasurer, as I already mentioned. We established a formal procedure this year for handling complaints against Cognitive Science Society fellows. That was quite a difficult and complex thing to figure out, but important, I think. On a kind of technical level, We changed the proceedings length limits for the paper to allow unlimited space for references. And that was previously discussed as an option by the governing board a while ago, decided to not do it. That idea was reignited by a suggestion from a society member, and we came back to it and decided now was the time to do it. A kind of small thing, but we carbon offset the carbon footprint of this venue. So all the rooms and electricity and stuff we're burning, we offset that. And also we offset the carbon associated with the travel for our invited speakers and members of the Society's executive committee and governing board who came here to Toronto. So kind of done what we can to make our part of this conference carbon neutral. And you can offset your travel too. We have a scheme for doing that via planting trees actually in Scotland to offset carbon. It's linked from the Society's webpage. So if you haven't done done so already, you can estimate and offset your carbon footprint for being here. Okay, bigger ticket items. We approved an increased expenditure on the 2022 conference while keeping registration rates around the 2019 levels. Basically, the registration covers about half the cost of the conference. The reason it's so much more expensive this year is all the hybrid infrastructure. It's really expensive to run a conference that's fully hybrid in the way we've done this year. I'm really proud of it. I think it's worked really well. We'll see what people say in the post-conference survey. I think that was a worthwhile investment, particularly given the uncertainty about what the COVID situation would be, who could come, increasing awareness of the environmental costs of traveling to conferences, problems with visas and all that stuff. We heard something about inclusion and how hybrid can help with who's represented at a conference. So I'm really proud of that, but it was expensive. We also upped the amount we give the conference co-chairs to pay for invited speakers to travel, because if you don't have a budget to pay for people to come, it restricts who you can invite as invited speakers to people who can afford to pay to come. So we're covering more of those costs now. But that's why the conference was so expensive to run. We also made a $87,000 contribution to the Executive Editor Outreach Fund. So this is a fund that was actually initiated by our journal executive editors, and Rick Dale and Andrea Bender. We give them a stipend for doing all that work of running the journals, and they gave us the money back and said, look, please just use this to promote cognitive science. That seems like such a good idea that we thought we would put some society money into it too. So that fund supports efforts to make cognitive science accessible to non-experts. We're targeting high school or early undergraduate students. You're going to see some activities in that direction straight after the conference, I think. And we're also going to provide a grant scheme for kind of activities and events which make cognitive science welcoming to underrepresented minorities, people with disabilities and other marginalized communities. And all that stuff is going to be coordinated by Monique Krause, who is our outreach coordinator, one of the people we've recently appointed. And you're going to be hearing a lot more from Monique soon through our various communication channels. And then finally, just on Tuesday, we agreed that we would allocate $40,000 for sign language translation at CogSci 2023. That's not something we've previously offered at our conferences. This is a start. And we're also allocated an additional $50,000 to support student travel to CogSci 2023 to try and make sure that people can get there. Okay, so that's the kind of thing we spend the money on. How can you get involved? Well, you can stand for election to the governing board. You can either nominate someone or nominate yourself for the governing board. There's always a call for nominations in March. Governing board members are selected via society-wide election. Members get to vote. If you're elected, you serve for 6 years. So if you have a vision for how the society should work, what kinds of things we should be doing and investing in, then stand for the governing board. It is a working board. If you're elected, you have to be prepared to serve on committees and take time to participate in collective decision-making throughout the year. And you have to come to the conference in some format to attend the board meeting. So that's the commitment you make to be part of the board. If you're looking for something a little lighter touch, you could serve on one of our committees. We have a bunch of committees that handle various aspects of the society's business. You can see the full list on the conference the society webpage. Those committees are often looking for members to serve on the committee. You can look out for those calls, or if there's a committee that you're into, then just approach the committee chair. That's listed on the webpage too. People will be happy to hear from people who want to help out. And finally, you can nominate people. We're often making calls for nominations for the governing board or for fellows or for prizes or editors. Nominate the people you want to represent you, or nominate yourself so that people like you are represented. Okay, so just briefly looking ahead to future conferences. As you've heard several times now, CogSci 2023 is going to be in beautiful Sydney, Australia. This will be 2023 will be the 45th annual meeting of the Cognitive Science Society. It will be the second time ever it's been held outside of North America and Europe. The previous time was in 2012 when it was in Japan. It's actually only been held outside of North America. Sydney will be the 7th time out of 45. So it's kind of overdue that we broadened our geographical reach, and that's a long-standing commitment of the Society to do that. The co-chairs for 2023 will be Micah Goldwater, Florencia Angoro, Brett Hayes, and Desmond Ong, and you'll hear more from them in the conference closing. We're looking for co-chairs for 2024, so if you have a vision for the conference theme, who you would invite to speak to that theme, then come forward as a conference co-chair for 2024. You'll be responsible for the intellectual vision of the conference and also managing that selection of papers and posters with support from the Society. And then the logistics of the actual conference are handled by us, but really by Podium, who are fantastic. So if you're interested in doing that, contact Erica Wojcik, our Executive Officer. Her email is also on the next slide. Okay, so that's it. If you have any questions or ideas about how the Society could do better, or you want to get involved, let us know. I'm here now. You can ask me, or if you want to do it offline, you can email me, or you can email better Erica, our Executive Officer. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions or comments from anyone online or in the room now. Let me just find the chat on my phone. Yes, go for it.
Hi. Thank you. Hello. I'm sure it'll be fascinating to see what people say about the hybrid format, in the post-conference survey. What will the decision-making process be like for the Sydney conference around, like, will there be any hybrid component? Like, yeah, what do you imagine in terms of how that decision will get made and what the timeline will be?
Right. So the way it worked this year is that we had a hybridization committee, which you served on.
Yes, I did.
That's Lilia Reisman. Yeah, so I imagine a similar process for Sydney. There's definitely going to be a hybrid component. We're committed to that for the reasons I enumerated before. The challenge with Sydney is the time difference. So there's no point spending hundreds of thousands of dollars streaming everything live if everyone who could be on the other end of that stream is asleep. So we'll have to figure out a way to do that. That was somewhat straightforward. It seemed more straightforward here. It's going to be the time zone is an extra challenge in Australia for people who are at this conference. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that. We're going to have to do it somewhat rapidly because we're about to sign the contract with the Sydney venue, and they need to know exactly how many rooms we need and stuff like that. So after this, I think me, Adele, who's the incoming chair, Erica, our Executive Officer, and Anna Papafragu will put our heads together and figure out how we're going to make that decision. But there will be a hybrid component. We just have to figure out, kind of finesse it a little bit. Have you got thoughts on it?
I mean, yes, but
we might solicit those from you. You were very helpful figuring it out for this year. So thanks for that, and we might come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick question: what percentage of the registration this year was virtual as opposed to in person?
In terms of numbers, it was 50-50, basically. We had 700 people registered to be here in person and 700 who registered to attend virtually. There might have been a bit of a move at the last minute from in person to virtual because I think the COVID situation deteriorated a little bit. But yeah, it's 50-50.
Thank you.
I can't see anything in the chat or the Q&A. Oh, yes. Hi. Hello.
Thanks a lot for the overview. I have also a question regarding the hybrid format. So is there any plans on further supporting the satellite events that were taking place in other continents, countries?
Yeah, that is. So we have meetups at the minute. So these are kind of organic grassroots events. We help people set those up. So we've got a kind of manual, Charles Kemp, who's chairs our international committee. He basically put together a guide for people who are organizing these kind of satellite events, meetups. There are a couple of, that's definitely one way to go. There are a couple of things that, a couple of concerns about doing more of that or amplifying the society's involvement of those. So one is that we're quite stretched running the event as it is now. If we had to simultaneously run, say, 3 parallel conferences simultaneously in 3 different locations, Lauren's not in the room, I don't think, and so can't have heard me say that, but like her head would explode. Really, we'd have to have three people equally as competent as Lauren. That'd be really challenging. The other concern is that we genuinely want the satellite events to be satellite events, and there's a concern if you have a conference, say in Australia or somewhere in South America or in Africa, and you have a satellite event in North America or Western Europe, that becomes the real hub. So what we haven't quite figured out is how to make the main venue the main venue and avoid one of those satellites kind of bloating, so that in effect the conference doesn't move around to different audiences and different communities in the way we want it to. Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff we're wrestling with. The compromise we've gone for at the minute is these grassroots kind of meetups, but we're constantly looking at that. And I know Charles has got some really interesting ideas for how we could potentially expand that without running into those kinds of problems I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. I can't see anything in the Q&A. I can't see anything in the chat. There's nothing in the room. Okay, so thank you very much for sticking around. Oh, Kevin.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Kenny, for your leadership of the society over the course of the past year. It has continued to be a challenging time, many difficult decisions to make. You've commented on some of the trade-offs that we're facing and how difficult it is to know what the right decisions are moving forward. But the commitment of the society and your commitment, and I know also as Adele comes in, her commitment to continuing to do everything that we can in service of the mission of the society is really genuine. And so thank you for that. And thank you to Adele for your leadership in the coming year.
Thanks, Kevin. That's very kind. I was just trying to copy what you did the previous year. Emulation's fairly easy. Yes, question at the back.
Thanks. So in light of the issues raised in the last talk, we were talking about conferences in Australia, Western Europe, North America. What moves could we make to have conferences in North Africa, South America, India, or even satellite events?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. The aspiration of the governing board and what was agreed, the agreed kind of decision is that we should rotate roughly on a cycle of North America, Europe, somewhere else in the rest of the world. So every 3 years we go outside of North America and Europe. COVID messed with that. Obviously, we had 2 years where we were virtual. So Sydney is basically restarting that. But then we'll be looking at Europe, North America, and then somewhere outside of those 2 areas in 2026 potentially. So we have to figure out where that's going to be. And we haven't worked that out yet. There's a process of scouting venues. So for the one that ended up in Australia, we looked at a range of possible places across the Asia Pacific region, balancing the kinds of venues they could offer, the amount they would charge us, the amount of local subsidies we get to kind of reduce that costs. And that's how we ended up as in Australia, and in Sydney in particular, had the venues that would work, that it was financially attractive enough. There's a bunch of stuff you need to put on a conference like this, and cost is one factor. So that's how we ended up there. So for 2026 or whenever the next non-Europe, North America conference is, we'll have to figure that out. But the aspiration is definitely to not just move to 3 bases like and add Australia. Basically, the aim is we should be having conferences, I think, in South America and in Africa. And in other parts of the Asia Pacific region. Yeah, so there's something the GB is going to have to figure out. It's going to be difficult.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, there's a question. Oh, there's several questions online. Thanks, guys. So Taylor Guba says, how can graduate students get involved other than the one position available on the board? So that will be this is my recommendation, as well as looking out for nominations and stuff. Serve on one of our committees. Look out for calls for committees looking for additional members, or just if there's a thing you care passionately about and we have a committee for it, contact the chair of that committee. If there's a thing you care passionately about and we don't have a committee for it and think we should, then contact Erica Wojcik and talk it through with her. Carmen says, hi Carmen. Carmen Saldana says, could you say a bit more about the investment fund? Who and where is the investment with and in? So we have forgotten the name of the company now. We use professional investment managers. Morgan Stanley, we put constraints on them on the kinds of things they can invest in. So they're not allowed to invest in the arms trade, for instance. They're doing a better job of growing that fund than we would do if I managed it. And as you would know, if you'd seen the state of my personal finances. Yeah, so it's with professionals. We put constraints on them so it's invested in ways that we don't think our members will object to. David Nola or Noel, could you comment on the health of the journals? For example, how does the rate of publication compare with years past? Is there a backlog? I have to check the details. We got a report from the executive editors of both our journals. My mental note was the journals are doing great. They're getting lots of submissions. There's no backlog thanks to the kind of rapid early publication. So my recollection is that everything's looking really healthy with the journals. They've expanded the editorial boards. They're trying to make sure they maintain or increase diversity of the kind of people who submit and the kind of disciplines who submit, but my impression is they're in good shape. Okie dokie. I think that's it, folks. Thank you very much for the questions. Thanks for being here in person or virtually. Like I said, I'm stepping down as chair at the end of today. I'm going to have at least one beer. And Adele Goldberg will be doing this. She'll be doing the closing at 5 p.m. in this room, I believe. And then she'll be here talking to you in the same sort of capacity this time next year in Sydney. Okay, thanks, folks. Cheers.